Good morning, fourth grade. It's April 7th, and this is chapter 27 of The House of the Scorpion, a five-legged horse. The rest of the day went, from Matt's point of view, very well. He drifted from group to group, listening to conversations and storing up information. In case someone were to wonder why he was so ignorant, he didn't ask many questions. He learned that the keepers were in charge of people who couldn't take care of themselves. They took in the orphans, the homeless, the insane, and molded them into good citizens. The orphans were known as lost boys and lost girls, and they lived in different buildings. Matt couldn't figure out why everyone seemed to hate the keepers, although no one except Chacho said so directly. Raoul seemed nice enough. Matt also learned that the country of opium was called Dreamland here. No one really knew what lay beyond its borders. There were so many stories of zombie slaves and vampire king who lived in the castle. The chupacabras haunted its mountains and occasionally crossed over into Aztlan to drink the blood of goats. Boys who had not seen their parents taken believed that they had made it to the United States. Several boys assured Matt they were only waiting for their parents to send for them. Then they would all be rich and happy in the golden paradise that lie beyond Dreamland. Matt doubted it. The farm patrol was very efficient, and besides, El Patron had told him just as many people ran away from the United States as towards it. If a golden paradise had ever lain to the north, it wasn't there anymore. Matt helped Fidelito make pills. It seemed monstrously unfair that the little boy was deprived of food simply because he was slower than the larger boys. Fidelito responded with such adoration that Matt began to regret his good deed. The kid reminded him a little of Furball. Stop for a second and think about why Matt might be regretting helping Fidelito. They had a half-hour break for lunch. First, the guards checked everyone's work output that morning. Then they brought in the steaming cauldron of beans and handed out tortillas. Before anyone was allowed to eat, the boys had to recite the 5 principles of good citizenship and the 4 attitudes leading to right mindfulness. The food was doled out according to whether a boy had reached his quota or not. Fidelito looked at Matt with shining eyes as his bowl was filled to the brim. After the lunch, the work started again. Matt helped Fidelito for a while, then switched to Chacho's table for variety. He quickly figured out the pattern he was supposed to weave. "Enjoy it while you can," grunted Chacho. "Enjoy what?" said Matt, holding up a finished sandal. "The thrill of moving from one job to another. Once you settle in, keepers will let you do only one thing. It's supposed to be efficient." Matt considered this information as he continued to weave plastic. "Can't you ask for something else?" Chacho laughed. "Sure, you can ask. You won't get it, though. Raoul says worker bees do the best they can with whatever job they're given. That's his way of saying, tough toenails, sucker." Matt thought a while longer. "What was that piece of wood you were working on when I arrived?" For a moment, Matt thought the boy wasn't going to answer. Chacho twisted his strip of plastic so viciously it broke. He had to start over with a new one. "It took me weeks to find that wood," he said at last. "I think it was from an old packaging crate. I polished it and sanded it. I was going to find more pieces and glue them together." Chacho fell silent again. "And make what?" Matt urged. "Promise you won't tell?" "Of course. A guitar." That was the last answer Matt expected. Chacho had such clumsy-looking hands he didn't even seem capable of playing a musical instrument. "Do you know how to play?" "Not as well as my father. He taught me to make guitars, though, and I'm pretty good at that." Was he taken in Dreamland?" said Matt. "Caramba! Do you think I belong with the rest of these losers?" "Me encarcelaron por feo. I was locked up for being ugly." "I'm no orphan. My dad's living in the United States. He's got so much money he can't even fit it into his pockets. And he's going to send for me as soon as he buys a house." Chacho looked absolutely furious. But Matt could tell from his voice that tears weren't far below the surface. Matt worked on his sandal, not looking at Chacho. He noticed the other boys were absorbed in their work, too. They knew they had to know. that Chacho's father wasn't going to send for anyone anytime soon. But only Matt understood what really happened to him. Chacho's father was bending and cutting poppies all day in the hot sun, and on still, breathless nights he was sleeping in the fields to keep from being suffocated by the bad air from the pits. He's talking about the area outside of the Egypt pits. The Egypt hotel thing where the Egypts sleep. It's basically a prison where Matt almost drowned in the yellow sludge. In the evening, the lunchtime ritual was repeated. The food was exactly the same. Afterward, the boys washed dishes, tidied up the workroom, and moved the tables to one side. From a storage room, they dragged out beds and fitted them on top of one another to form bunk beds 3 levels high. "Put Fidelito's bed on the bottom," someone told Matt. "Which one is it?" asked Matt. "Smell the mattress," said Chacho. "I can't help it," the little boy protested. They were marched into a communal shower by the border guards. Communal means shared. Matt had never seen anyone naked outside the art classes on TV. He found it embarrassing. He kept his right foot planted on the floor so no one could see the writing that proclaimed him a clone. He was very glad to shrug on a coarse nightshirt and retreated to the workroom, now bedroom. "Do we sleep now?" he asked. "No, we get the bedtime story," said Chacho. The boys seemed energized by something. They clustered around a bunk bed under a window, and Chacho put his ear to the wall. After a moment, he pointed at the window and nodded. Fidelito climbed the bunk bed like a little monkey and lifted his nightshirt. This was the moment of glory. "Voy a enseñarle la mapa mundi," he announced. "I'm going to show him the map of the world?" thought Matt. Show who? And what did he mean by map of the world? Fidelito struck his skinny backside between the bars, he stuck it between the bars of the high window and waggled it. A minute later, Matt heard Raul's voice say, "One of these days I'm going to bring a slingshot." Fidelito scrambled off the bed to the cheers of the rest of the boys. "I'm the only one small enough to fit," he said, swaggering around like a bantam rooster. When Raul entered, he said nothing at all about being mooned. He pulled up a chair and the boys settled on the bunk beds to listen. The title of this talk was "Why Individualism is Like a 5-Legged Horse." I'm going to pause really quick and say that individualism is basically, well, you can see the word individual in it. It's a word that describes being yourself. So why individualism is like a 5-legged horse? Raul explained, and remember, these guys are communist in Aztlan. Raul explained that things went over smoothly when people worked together. They decided on a goal and then helped one another achieve it. What would happen, the keeper asked all the boys, if you were rowing a boat and only half of you wanted to go one way and the other half another? He waited expectantly, and after a while, someone put up his hand and said, "We'd go in circles." "Very good," said Raul, beaming at his audience. "We all have to paddle together to reach the shore." "What if we don't want to reach the shore?" Chacho said. "A very good question," said the keeper. "Can anyone tell us what would happen if we stayed out in the boat for days and days?" He waited. "We'd starve to death," a boy said. "There's your answer, Chacho," Raul said. "We'd all starve to death." Sorry, I forgot to let you see that page. That brings me to the problem of the 5-legged horse. A horse runs very well on 4 legs. It's what he's made for. But suppose he grew a 5th leg that only wanted to please itself. The other 4 legs would be running and running. But the 5th leg, which we call individualism, being yourself, would want to walk slowly to enjoy a beautiful meadow, or it might want to take a nap. Then the poor animal would fall over. That's why we take that unhappy horse to a vet and have the 5th leg cut off. It may seem harsh, but we've all got to pull together in the new Aztlan, or we'll all wind up laying in the dirt. Does anyone have a question? Raul waited a long time. Finally, Matt put up his hand and said, "Why don't you put a computer chip in the horse's brain? Then it wouldn't matter how many legs it had." A gasp went around the room. "Are you saying—" The keeper stopped, as though he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Are you suggesting we turn the horse into a zombie?" "I don't see much difference between that and sawing off the extra legs," said Matt. "What you're after is a horse that works hard and doesn't waste time looking at flowers." "This is great," Chacho said. "But you don't see the difference?" Raoul was so outraged that he could hardly speak. "We recite the 5 principles of good citizenship and the 4 attitudes leading to right mindfulness every time we want to eat," explained Matt. "You keep telling us that orderly production of resources is vital to the general good of the people. It's obvious we're supposed to follow the rules and not walk slowly through meadows. But horses aren't as smart as people. It makes sense to program them with computer chips." Matt thought that this was a brilliant argument, and he couldn't see why the keeper was so upset. El Patron would have seen the logic of it in an instant. "I can see we have to work our cut with you. We have our work cut out with you," Raoul said in a tight voice. "I can see we have a nasty little aristocrat who needs to be educated about the will of the people." Matt was amazed at the man's reaction. The keeper had asked for questions. In fact, he'd almost demanded them. "Well," said Raoul, brushing off his uniform as though he'd touched something dirty, "the sooner this nasty little aristocrat goes to the plankton factory, the better. That's all I can say." And he flounced out of the room. Instantly, all the boys crowded around Matt. "Wow, you showed him," they cried. "You mooned him even better than I did," said Fidelito, bouncing up and down on a bed. "He didn't even make us recite the 5 principles of good citizenship and the 4 attitudes leading to right mindfulness," exulted a boy. "Heck, I had you down as a wuss," said Chacho. "You've got more nerves than a herd full of bulls." What did I do?" said Matt, completely bewildered, meaning in amazement. "You only told him the keepers were trying to turn us into a bunch of crots." I guess crot is their word for Egypt. Late that night, Matt lay on a top bunk and went over the events of the day. He didn't know how much trouble he was in or what kind of revenge to expect. He didn't dislike Raoul. He only thought that the man was an idiot. Matt realized he'd better walk carefully around people who took offense at mere words. What harm could words do? Tam Lin loved a good argument. The more spirited, the better. He said it was like doing push-ups in your brain. Matt felt his right foot under the scratchy wool blanket. This was one of his weaknesses. This was his one weakness, and he despaired of keeping it hidden. Tam Lin might have said that there was no difference between humans and clones, but everything in Matt's experience argued against it. Humans hated clones. It was the natural order of things, and Raoul could only use it to destroy him. No one must ever see the tattoo that tied Matt to Dreamland, and to the vampire who lived in its castle. Vampire, thought Matt. El Patron would have enjoyed that description. He loved to inspire fear. Matt had he added a few more crumbs to the stash of information he was accumulating about this new world in which he found himself. An aristocrat was the lowest form of life, a parasite who expected honest peasants to be his slaves. A crot, the deadliest insult anyone could utter, was a simple, harmless Egypt, like the thousands who had cut grass, washed floors, and tended poppies as far back as Matt could remember. The clean word for them was zombies. Whatever they were called, Matt thought they deserved pity, not hatred. He couldn't bring himself to think about Celia and Tam Lin. Sorrow threatened to overwhelm him, and he didn't want to be caught sobbing like a baby. Instead, he thought about going to San Luis. He'd look for the convent of Santa Clara right away and find Maria. The thought of Maria cheered him up immensely. Matt basked in the approval of his newfound friends. It was the most wonderful thing that had ever happened to him. The boys accepted him as though he were a real human. He felt like it had been like walking across the desert his whole life, and now he'd arrived at the biggest and best oasis in the world.